Oh, hello, fellow Earthling. This is Earthling 6455463728. And I wanted to talk about this for a long time. The idea that maybe in the encounter between the New World and the Old World, the wrong side died, or the wrong side was defeated. Now, if you are maybe Caucasian, or maybe black, of African descent, or any other side except for Native American of some sort or the other, to you this might sound awful. Like, should it have been reversed? Should the world be populated by Native Americans for the most part, as opposed to them having died? Well, I don't think it could have ended any other way. There was no way that whenever the old world met the new world was going to die. That's just how it is. And the reason for that is that the old world brought diseases and the new world didn't. As I've spoken to my friend about this, what if Christopher Columbus had gone back home with a bunch of diseases? Would anybody have ever gone to the New World again? I doubt that. That would never have happened. They would have seen it as some kind of a cursed trip, that, this was God's vengeance for them doing what men were not supposed to do, or blah, 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 blah. And that would be what the survivors would have thought, because most people would have died if he had gone back with a number of diseases. To begin with, he probably would never have even reached back at home, because by the time he left, I'm sure a number of people in the New World were already dying. So he might have died himself, and if he and his crew had returned, if one disease didn't get you, another one would, the same way as it happened to the Native Americans. And as part of the reason why it had to be like that is something that I learned recently, and many of you might have understood because of this pandemic, which is that, but you might not have generalized it and fully grasped it. Domestication brings diseases. Domestication and, let's say, being in close proximity to animals, whether that might be a camel, because right now I'm seeing some ridiculous things where people want to sue China because of COVID-19. They don't want to sue the bats. I mean, I think there's a legally valid grounds for suing the bats, is what I think. So they want to sue the Chinese people for eating bats. Do they want to provide an alternative to the bats? Or do they want to give them a different place to live? And should, in that case, should China sue Europe for colonizing and taking over parts of China and subjugating China? Or are we just going with more recent stuff? Anyway, that's a whole ridiculous long thing but anyway, domestication and close proximity to animals breeds diseases. And Europe, one of the things that, there's that gun, I think it's gun, steel, and something, and disease or something like that. There's a book like that. And guns and steel, I don't think that they would have made much difference. I was recently listening to a podcast on the end of the Aztec Empire, or maybe it's the Inca, either one. The fact of the matter is that the Native Americans were learning how to deal with guns. They were learning how to deal with all of these different things in their fight against the conquistadors. They were learning how to deal with it. And these things are very expensive, Whether it is gunpowder, whether it is steel, whether it is whatever it is, these things are expensive to make. And if your enemy figures out how to deal with those things or to counteract them, and they have many more numbers and you're surrounded, and they know everything about the place where they live and you just invaded, I think that you might have a little bit of a problem. So the guns and steel, especially guns that probably didn't have very good aim, they probably didn't have very good range. You know, I don't know that those things mattered as much as simply the disease. You know, there's a lot of places where they were, for example, they were also saying that, again, Montezuma, is it the Aztecs? Anyway, whoever it was, the fact of the matter is, by the time it would have been the Aztecs, by the time the conquistadores reached, there was already disease that had came before them that was starting, the effects of it was starting to be felt. So I don't think that it mattered too much. But on the flip side, can you imagine what the world would have been like if we did not have the plagues that come from microorganisms jumping back and forth from a human into a pig or goat or cow or camel, whatever, and coming back out as something worse? A world without plagues. Because obviously, if the New World people had plagues to give, they may have given them to the Spaniards. And that would have been the end of the Spaniards. One of the things that I find interesting is every Spaniard that they would have encountered would have had to run the gauntlet of diseases to become an adult and to get on that boat to come over. Every single child that grew up in Europe had to go through whatever diseases happened to be lurking around. In order to pass on those diseases, they would have had to overcome those diseases and been immune to some degree, and perhaps be carriers or people who were just getting sick, but they would have just killed everybody on the ship if it was something like that. Most of these people would have probably already had these diseases, you know. In addition, I imagine the rats that they brought probably didn't help the situation either. But in a situation where, for whatever reason, Native Americans were in charge and there was no domestication of animals, we wouldn't be dealing with a pandemic right now. Pandemics probably maybe they never happened to people in the New World. Maybe a child growing up in the New World, yes, they would have to contend with all the things that antibiotics allow us to combat, minus bubonic plague and smallpox and diphtheria and all of these other things that we have to get vaccinated against, measles, rubella, and mumps. All of these things that we have to worry about, we got, and that's our heritage from being from the old world. So it's kind of interesting that the people who, yes, the Aztecs, they had sacrifice, human sacrifice. But maybe that was the worst of it. I mean, when you think of the fact that there were things like the Inquisition, that there were things like all of these gamut of diseases that a child would have to go through their entire life. Was life that much better in Europe? I don't know that it was. And were they that much more advanced? I mean, definitely a cannonball and those ships, amazing stuff. But the people in the New World didn't even need that stuff. And they had food, they had clothing, they had a huge population. That did not happen. And that's the thing. Why would there, there's a lot of people who discount the fact that the Native American populations would have been high. But why wouldn't it have been? What would have kept their population low? In the old world, disease kept populations low. So if there weren't that many diseases for Christopher Columbus to take back home, then the population of the people in the in the Americas should have been huge. It should have been as big as food could supply, because it certainly wouldn't have been a list of diseases that they would have gotten from the animals that they did not domesticate. So, I think this is one of these things where if you don't look too hard at it, you can keep up with the mythology that people want to have when they want to limit the population of the people in the New World and say there were only a couple million of them there altogether. There was nothing close to the New World. Why would there not have been more people in the New World if there were less diseases? And I'm sure people like to have sex just as much in the New World as in the Old, so they would just have been limited by food. So there were probably more people in the New World than in the Old. And even though it would have been impossible for things to end up any other way, it is interesting to see and to appreciate how life could have been different and how life would have been for people in the New World, not having to deal with these plagues every 100 years, every 30 years, every whatever. And there are new plagues that are coming because we domesticated animals. We domesticated animals, and our love of animals. Right now, as I was saying, some state in the U.S. is suing China because of COVID-19, as if they made it. So then they'd have to prove it in trial. Unfortunately, civil lawsuits, to me, being so much easier, you just need to have a majority of belief, like a 51% versus a 49%. Yeah, I think they did it. That's what happens in a civil case. In a criminal case, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. So maybe they might win. Who knows? I don't know what they will accomplish by it. I think the case should be thrown out. But that's how cases go. The law has to adjudicate on the matter. We cannot say yay or nay before. That's how we have to waste resources by suing China, as if that will achieve anything, but people are doing it anyway. But yeah, my point is that right now there's some wasting disease in deer in North America, and it's like mad cow disease, but for deer. And people are eating deer in America, and some of the deer that they're eating probably is infected with this chronic wasting disease. What happens if that spreads to livestock? What happens if meat from America is exported or, basically infected with this thing? Should we blame America for continuing to allow people to hunt these deer that potentially have this chronic wasting disease? I think there's room for we can think about that. But anyway, guys, wish me lucks. And yep, one last thing: the amount of antibiotics that farmers use for their livestock. When I'm sure the U.S. uses a ton load of it, everybody else who has livestock, China, but then again, China has factories in the U.S. They bought farms in the U.S. So I don't know, but it's interesting that who are we going to blame when there is disease that is caused by all these antibiotics because of our desire for meat, farmed meat. Anyway, wish me lucks. You can like or unlike. You can comment, subscribe, and or share. Or you can do nothing. Peace.